All right, take it on faith. Chapter 2. The darkness of the future is the necessary space for the exercise of our faith. A Carthusian monk for 11th century. Developing a spiritual practice begins by choosing to have faith in something, an idea, a teacher, a saint, a religion, a prayer. We put our faith in something noble, and then we take it into our real lives, into our strengths and weaknesses, and hopes and fears and disappointments, and work with it. A spiritual truth, an object of our faith, which doesn't hold up in a prison cell or during an earthquake, isn't a big enough truth. The big truths are true throughout any possible condition life can present to us. When we choose faith, it doesn't mean that bad things no longer happen to us. It just means that there is no longer any cause for fear or bitterness in our pain. Fear implies we're unprotected, and bitterness implies something shouldn't have happened the way it did. Both are false to the person of faith. Fear says you better watch out, it's dark up ahead, but in daily practice of faith you can remind yourself, of course it's dark up ahead. Up ahead is not my business, this moment is, and it's light enough for me to see right now. We're like a coal miner carrying his light on his cap. Whenever he arrives, it's light enough for him to see. He doesn't look ahead and say, but it's dark up there. He knows that by the time he gets there, it will be light. This light by which we see comes from the inside of us, so it makes more sense to work on brightening our light and keeping the battery strong than to worry about what's in the dark up ahead. The light only exists here, wherever we are, never there, and it only exists now and never then. Faith accepts this, fear refuses to. Rejoice in the unknown. Reread the quote at the beginning of this chapter. Think about it. If the future were not unknown, not covered in darkness, then there would be no free will and no need for faith. And the whole mind were lit. If the whole mind were lit, the coal miner would have no use for his own light. Our individual spiritual journey, the wrestling, the struggles against fears, weaknesses, and shadows, would be meaningless because we'd see exactly how it's all going to turn out. Life itself would be meaningless. If there were no possibility that our free choice could make a difference in the kind of future we will experience. The darkness of the future and the fact that no one knows, no one has a guarantee of anything at all, is not a reason for fear. It's a cause for rejoicing because it means our lives are important. It means all possibilities remain open to us. It is indeed the very ground, the absolute necessity of all spirituality. At a conference in Switzerland some years ago, a woman asked all the panelists, How do you see the world 50 years from now? And they all answered from their own areas of expertise, except for His Holiness the Dalai Lama of Tibet. He spoke last and said, Madam, I don't even know what kind of tea I'll be having with dinner tonight. How could I possibly know what will happen 50 years from now? And then he laughed and laughed. There was a great peace and happiness in the absence of all fear, in the acceptance of our proper sphere of concern, doing our very best, shining our very brightest in this one little spot we find ourselves in. That's all we're designed to do. Ego's kinfolk. The great enemy of faith is our own ego. Ego says, yeah, faith is fine for Sundays, but meanwhile you need me to really watch out for you in the real world. My uncle Fear will protect you. My brother Anger will defend you. My sister Desire will bring you pleasure. God's pretty busy, you know, but I'm paying attention to you alone. Who loves you, baby? It's a persuasive pitch, but our own experience is what eventually forces us to realize it's a hype. What ego doesn't mention is what we feel like living with fear, anger, desire, greed, ambition, and other forms of ego protection. We feel cut off. We feel constantly apart from instead of a part of. We feel like abandoned orphans in a chaotic, violent universe. When our ego is our protector, when ego is what we have our strongest faith in, we feel rotten and lonely, as most of us know all too well by now. Then we begin to see through the lies and try to make some changes through some honest spiritual searching. Ego's kinfolk turn the presence up a notch. Ego's cousin Doubt says, oh, you're really going to believe in all that religious mumbo-jumbo? That's just stuff people convince themselves in order to feel better. Don't be an idiot. And fear is right next to him saying, yeah, you don't want to make a fool of yourself, do you? Aren't you afraid of losing your edge? I see many people, even some of the most religious among us, abandoning true faith and replacing it with a qualified faith which rationalizes their hopelessness. They seem to be losing hope in perfection and complete spiritual transformation. Many clergymen, themselves having lost hope, have become essentially therapists instead of a gateway for the parishioners to reach the transcendent, sacred reality. It breaks my heart to see so many beautiful people redefining the divine in order to settle for less. But God hasn't changed. Allah has not become divided. Buddha's third noble truth, that there is a perfect state of being, hasn't become untrue. Christ hasn't died. Many of us are simply afraid to continue hoping for and having faith in what they promised us, a direct, perfect, total, fulfilling meeting with God. Please don't lose hope. Choose to have faith that there is indeed one great reality, which hasn't the slightest imperfection or disappointment or confusion. The way to truly experience it for yourself is to develop your spiritual practices and then include every moment and every event of your life in your spiritual journey. No time out. In the end, a story of compassionate cruelty.